On Arirang News, we listen to what the delegation that'll choose the winning bid for the World Expo 2030 has to say as they wrap up their on-site assessment in Busan. Meanwhile, President Yoon calls for all-out efforts to bring the expo to the country's largest port city. Amid escalating threats from the north, top nuclear envoys of South Korea and the U.S. strongly denounced Pyongyang and promised for strengthened cooperation as they met in Seoul today. Japan's nuclear chief is on the same page with their trilateral meeting scheduled for tomorrow. Taiwan President Tsai Ing-wen says democracy is under threat as she stood side by side with U.S. Housekeeper Kevin McCarthy in California. This in a show of democratic solidarity despite threats coming from China. Good evening. It's 9 p.m. here in South Korea. Thank you for joining us on Arirang News. Security is where we start tonight. Top nuclear envoys from the U.S. and Japan each reaffirmed bilateral cooperation with South Korea to counter escalating nuclear threats coming from the north. This with their trilateral meeting scheduled for tomorrow. Our foreign affairs correspondent Bae Eun-ji leads us off.
Top nuclear envoys of South Korea and the United States agreed to keep a close eye on the situation in North Korea for possible provocations and firmly respond to any threats with the two countries' combined defense readiness. On Thursday, Kim Gun, South Korea's special representative for Korean Peninsula Peace and Security Affairs, sat down for talks with his American counterpart Sung Kim in Seoul. This was their second meeting this year, having also met in Washington this February. South Korea's foreign ministry said the two officials reaffirmed that North Korea will certainly pay the price for any provocation that threatens the peace and security of the Korean Peninsula as well as the international community. They also decided to strengthen efforts and work with their allies to counter North Korea's illegal cyber activities such as cryptocurrency theft.
One thing that the top nuclear envoys of South Korea and the U.S. discussed was that more provocations from North Korea will only increase its isolation from the international community, make its economy worse, and that it has nothing to gain.
Seoul's Foreign Minister Park Jin also met Washington's top nuclear envoy and called for strong cooperation in order to build an environment for Pyongyang to return to denuclearization talks. Park also stressed that it's important for the two countries to work together on the human rights issue in North Korea. Separately, the South Korean envoy also held talks with the Japanese counterpart Takehiro Funakoshi in Seoul. They strongly condemned the North's recent series of provocations and agreed that it's important for the two countries to cooperate with the U.S. to build a united response against the regime's threats. The three nuclear envoys from the U.S., Japan, and South Korea will hold trilateral talks on Friday. Bae Eun-ji, Arirang News.
The latest International Atomic Energy Agency's report on Japan's planned release of radioactive wastewater from its Fukushima nuclear power plant acknowledges the efforts to ensure safety. However, it questions the absence of data on the impact of seafood from specific locations. Lee Kyung-eun explains.
The IAEA says Japan's Fukushima wastewater monitoring system is largely reliable, but it has expressed some lingering concerns. As part of its ongoing safety review of the wastewater from the nuclear plant that was damaged in 2011 earthquake, the agency released its midterm report on Wednesday. And the agency confirmed that TEPCO, the operator of the plant, is taking comprehensive and realistic programs to monitor the safety of the soon-to-be discharged wastewater. It added that TEPCO has made significant progress after taking into account the agency's previous feedback, which is in line with international safety standards. However, the report pointed to improvements to be made. Regarding TEPCO's environmental impact assessment, the IAEA called for further explanation as to why the consumption of seafood caught at the location 3 kilometers north from the site is excluded, noting that concentrations in seafood are likely to be higher there. Also against TEPCO's revised measure of radioactive contamination, the agency called for further information on the radiological impact of 2 radionuclides, C14 and I-129, and their impact on the environment. All of these are based on TEPCO's updated methods and programs assessed before the IAEA's second visit in November 2022. Any revisions made after that will be assessed later and will be published in following reports. The agency is aiming to release the finalized report before Japan's planned release of the wastewater later this year. Yoon, Arirang News.
The delegation from the Bureau of International Day Expositions that'll choose the winning bid for the World Expo 2030 has completed its project examination in South Korea's largest port city of Busan. Today, they held a press conference looking back on their 6-day stay. Our Song Yoo-jin brings us some of the highlights.
The last day of the BIE's on-site inspection of Busan was another busy one. The delegation visited the world's one and only UN Memorial Cemetery in the morning and held a luncheon with young people in South Korea. In the afternoon, they took the time to speak to reporters about their 6-day visit.
We looked at the project from a financial point of view, logistical point of view, if the project has the necessary political support, if it has the support by the commercial entities, if it has the support from citizens. Busan has everything that it takes to host a World Expo.
What impressed them the most was the heartfelt warmth of Busan.
The welcome that was given to us by the citizens of Busan showed really the support for the project of Expo 2030.
Recognizing and offering to help tackle shared global challenges through the Busan Initiative and its 3 sub-themes were the strengths the BIE pointed out in the bid. The initiative is a core strategy of the city's candidacy that seeks cooperation with other countries to resolve the digital divide, climate change, public health, and food shortage crisis.
Expos are not just the 6-month events, but it's the whole process leading up to the event, and perhaps even more importantly, it's what we do with what we learned from this event afterwards, and what kind of partnerships and strategies we can build as a global community. So from that point of view, I think that the city of Busan, together with the Expo Bid Committee and the government of Korea, have a very good idea on how to push this forward. Themes need to evoke emotion. They need to really draw something out of us so that we can, all of us, all the different countries around the world, come and present something truly useful at an Every Expo. And when you look at the theme of Busan, you have the idea of climate change.
After the press conference, the BIE enjoyed a farewell dinner, followed by a firework display at Gwanghwaلی Beach. The delegation will next write an assessment report and hand it to the BIE's executive committee for an review. Based on this and the remaining presentations of the 4 candidate cities, the final decision will be made in November. Song Yoo-jin, Arirang News, Busan.
As the delegation from the BIE wraps up its review of Busan, President Yoon Suk-yeol called on all local government chiefs to help with the bid, as he says, hosting the expo is not just Busan's work, but it's the whole nation's. Local government officials all agreed and pledged to spare no efforts. Our Kim Do-yeon reports.
As the Bureau International des Expositions wraps up its trip in Busan, the nation's #1 salesman himself went down to the southern port city to make another appeal to the assessing body. On Thursday, President Yoon Suk-yeol presided over the 4th Central and Local Government Cooperation meeting in Busan as he called on every local government to help out in winning the bid.
이번 부산 세계 박람회 유치는 지역 균형 발전의 견인차 역할을 하고 글로벌 중추국가로 도약하기 위해 우리가 반드시 유치해야 할 과제입니다. 부산만의 일이 아닙니다. 대한민국의 일이고 모든 시도의 일입니다.
To this, the attending 17 mayors and governors, as well as representatives from smaller districts, made a joint declaration pledging to do all they can to boost the bid. The declaration states that each local government will use all their channels to advertise Busan's bid while utilizing their relationships with foreign cities to get support.
In addition, the local government said they will make sure the hosting of the expo leads to better balanced regional growth in South Korea. The presidential office explains that such a move shows a united effort by the whole nation, and the BIE takes this aspect into account when choosing an expo host. As the whole session was broadcast live, ministers briefed the president and the public on how each ministry can also do its job on the road to hosting the expo. Each local government also got the chance to share their plans and promised every global event that takes place in their jurisdiction will be used to appeal to the rest of the world. President Yoon wrapped up the meeting by thanking everyone and underscoring the importance of a unified effort from both politicians and the public, as this expo will bring economic benefits to the whole nation. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Holding the 2030 World Expo is expected to bring huge economic benefits to the host country. So what can Busan and South Korea expect if the bid is successful? Our Lee Dae-yeon explains.
South Korea's government is all in to win the bid to host the World Expo in Busan. The economic impact it's expected to create is huge, 61 trillion won, or around $46.4 billion, with 500,000 jobs expected to be created. But this is not the first time that South Korea has hosted an expo. In 1993, there was a Daejeon Expo, which was science-themed, and in 2012, the Yeosu Expo, focusing on its theme of oceans. These two past events differ from a World Expo in that they were recognized expositions, also called specialized expos, where the host country has to pay for the construction of all the pavilions used by each participant country. These expos only run for 3 months. The World Expo that Busan is aiming to host is what's called a registered exposition, whereby each participant country has to cover the cost of the construction of their pavilion. This type of expo runs for 6 months. Large corporations are also kicking into gear in order to help Busan win. At the Entrepreneurs Committee for the World Expo 2030 Busan, 11 giant corporations including Samsung Electronics, Hyundai Motor, SK, and LG are doing all they can to make sure the bid is a success. Business leaders from these companies have been traveling across the globe to drum up more support while showcasing the latest technologies that South Korea has to offer, like the 6G network, robots, and metaverse during expo-related events. Startups are also hopeful of seeing the World Expo in Busan in 2030, as the event may help rebalance regional growth compared to the capital, Seoul.
This is a chance for startup technologies to be showcased to the global market on our home ground. This could be a point where startups could seek for their expansion. There was a startup program at the Dubai Expo, so we're urging the Busan city government to operate the program this time as well.
Local industrial tech institutes and around 300 local companies are also showing their support for the bid by pledging to help with the event's technology infrastructure. Lee Dae-yeon, Arirang News.
Lawmakers call for excruciating efforts to restructure South Korea's state-run energy companies to address their mounting deficits. This in remarks made by ruling People Power Party chief policymaker Park Dae-chul on Thursday, speaking at a meeting between the government, the ruling party, and the private sector. During the meeting, Korea Electric Power Corporation and Korea Gas Corporation reported plans to improve their financial soundness by reducing $10 billion in costs each by the year 2026. Park called on the public electricity and gas firms to continue restructuring until the public deems it to be enough. He also said that hikes in utility charges are inevitable, but by how much and how fast they'll be raised should be reviewed a little more first. In the wake of the president vetoing the opposition-led Grain Act revision, the government and the ruling party today came up with a plan to stabilize rice prices by preventing overproduction rather than mandating a purchase of surplus rice. Our political correspondent Lee Si-hoo explains.
South Korea will work to stabilize the supply and demand of rice so that by this year's harvest season, a standard bag of rice at 80 kilograms could cost around 200,000 Korean won, or around $150. That would be up approximately 13,000 Korean won, or about $10 from last year's harvest season. Now, this is part of a 6-step plan announced by the Agriculture Ministry at Thursday's meeting between the government, the ruling People Power Party, and the agricultural industry. The participants discussed ways to stabilize the rice market, expand subsidies for farmers, and foster the overall growth of the nation's agriculture. The new plan aims to bring up the price of rice for farmers by preventing overproduction. The government will reduce growing areas for rice to yield the appropriate production amount. A new support program will be launched to provide subsidies for farmers who experience changes in their profit beyond a certain standard. The subsidy plan for retiring farmers who want to transfer their farms to the next generation will be revised this year to be carried out next year. South Korea will also push for a greater farming workforce, Korean and non-Korean, with the aim of raising 30,000 new young farmers. The nation will also support smart farms. An online platform for grain sales will be launched by November of this year. This will hopefully reduce distribution costs by 6% by the year 2027. To further assist farmers in their everyday lives, the government is aiming to improve public benefits and medical services in rural regions. The government, the PPP, and the farming industry vowed to continue to closely communicate with each other to come up with better policies for farmers. This follows President Yoon's recent veto of the opposition-led revision to the Grain Management Act. The revised act calls on the government to buy surplus rice if demand falls short of production by 3 to 5% or if prices fall by 5 to 8% or more from the year prior. The bill passed the Assembly in late March. Lee Si-hoo, Arirang News.
Amid the global economic slowdown, South Korea's finance minister vows to ramp up investment projects and support to boost exports. This while he sees the impact of China's reopening not yet enough. Lee Soo-jin has details.
South Korea's exports saw a steeper drop last month than they had the month before. Finance Minister Chu Kyung-ho announced during an emergency economic meeting on Thursday that the nation's exports have been falling since last October. Exports tumbled nearly 14% in March compared to a year earlier. That's a sharper decline than the 7.5% on-year fall seen in February.
While auto and rechargeable battery exports are increasing, China's reopening has yet to boost semiconductor exports.
Outbound shipments to China sank by more than 33% from the previous year last month. Meanwhile, semiconductor exports were down by 34.5% on year. To boost exports and avoid the downward pressure on the economy, the government plans to create investment projects this year worth 13 trillion won, or around $9.8 billion.
We will make efforts to increase support in areas such as core technology R&D and policy financing so that exports for major industries such as chips can rebound soon. We will also focus on revitalizing our economy as soon as possible by boosting private investment.
The investment projects, which include smart logistics centers, semiconductor infrastructure, and charging stations, aim to encourage participation from the private sector. The government will also invest around $3 billion in research and development over the next 5 years to boost the chip, display, and battery industries. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
South Korea will train some 100,000 professionals in the biohealth industry over the next 5 years. This is part of the Yoon administration's push to make the biohealth industry a second semiconductor, in other words, a major driver of the Korean economy. The health ministry revealed a plan on Thursday during a governmental meeting. To achieve this goal, South Korea will provide practical training to students by increasing the number of university departments offering biohealth programs from 5 to 8 this year. The plan also includes creating quality jobs for the trained students through joint efforts from the public and private sectors. As of 2022, the global biohealth market is estimated to be worth $2 trillion and is expected to grow 5.4% annually until 2027 due to rapid aging and rising demand for health care. A rare high-profile meeting between Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen and U.S. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. They stood side by side in California in a show of democratic solidarity. This comes despite increasing threats from China. Kim Hyun-sung has more.
A historic meeting on American soil on Wednesday local time. Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen met with U.S. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy and stated that democracy is under threat.
We once again find ourselves in a world where democracy is under threat, and the urgency of keeping the beacon of freedom shining cannot be understated.
This meeting at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library is the highest level meeting on U.S. soil since Washington broke off ties with Taiwan back in 1979. Under Beijing's One China principle, China claims Taiwan as part of its own. And in an effort to maintain diplomacy with China, the U.S. officially only recognizes Beijing and has no formal ties with Taipei despite its unofficial relationship with the island. So this session could be read as an open defiance to China's position, even though Tsai's visit to the U.S. is referred to as just a stopover on her week-long trip to Central America.
The friendship between the people of Taiwan and America is a matter of profound importance to the free world, and it is critical to maintain economic freedom, peace, and regional stability.
China was not too happy about this meetup. Taiwan's defense ministry said that a Chinese aircraft carrier group led by the Shandong carrier sailed through waters off the island's southeast coast, in what seems to be a warning to Taipei. Also, Beijing's foreign ministry said in a statement that it firmly opposes and strongly condemns the meeting between Tsai and McCarthy, and that it sends a wrong message to the so-called Taiwan independent separatist forces. Strong words from the statement, which goes on to say that Beijing's One China policy is the basis of U.S.-China relations, and that this high-profile meeting shows that the U.S. has crossed the line and betrayed its commitments. Kim Hyun-sung, Arirang News.
The leaders of China and France met in Beijing on Thursday and discussed bilateral relations as well as the war in Ukraine. Chinese leader Xi Jinping said that the visit of Emmanuel Macron will inject new momentum and bring new vitality to China-Europe relations. He also pointed out that the two countries have worked together to maintain a positive and steady development in their bilateral ties over the past 3 years, despite an unstable international situation. Macron also urged Xi to bring Russia back to reason and help end the war in Ukraine. The French president also asked Xi to press Moscow to comply with international rules on the non-proliferation of nuclear weapons. Top officials from Iran and Saudi Arabia met in China on Thursday in an attempt to restore diplomatic relations. According to the Chinese Foreign Ministry and an Iranian state-run media, the foreign ministers released a joint statement and agreed to launch talks to reopen embassies and consulates within 2 months. The statement also included the resumption of flights and bilateral visits of official and private sector delegations, as well as the granting of visas to the citizens of the two countries. The deal to restore relations between Iran and Saudi Arabia was brokered by Chinese President Xi Jinping last month in a show of China's growing influence in the Middle East. Thursday's meeting was the first formal gathering of the two countries' top diplomats in more than 7 years.
The cooling trend will continue on for tomorrow here in South Korea. Morning temperatures will keep dropping to below the seasonal average. Lows will drop to 7 degrees Celsius in Seoul, and by Saturday, colder conditions are expected, with readings plummeting to 3 degrees. Big contrast in daily temperatures are also expected at the same time, so make sure to dress in layers. And for those across central regions, expect finest concentrations to soar for tomorrow. That, of course, includes the Seoul metropolitan area. For children or seniors, it is highly recommended to avoid outdoor activities for extended period of time. Also, gusty winds are in store for all the coastlines surrounding the peninsula. Please stay away from waters such as piers and breakwaters. Tomorrow, Seoul and Gyeongju will be starting off at 7 degrees. Highs in Seoul will get up to 15 degrees. Daejeon and Gwangju 16. Busan will be topping out at 20 degrees. Clear skies will make a return this weekend, but morning temperatures will stay chilly. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
That brings us to the end of the newscast on this Thursday night. Thank you for watching. We'll be back tomorrow with the latest news. Have a lovely night.